Welcome everybody and happy Friday. Welcome to day 3 of Start Strong 2021, a virtual summit for personal evolution. And we've had so many amazing speakers today. And now I'm so excited to introduce you to Liz Swan. And like so many of our speakers, such a variety of skills and talents and interests, from natural wellness, essential oils, outdoor. I always call you a coach, but it's an master outdoor educator. Is that right?
high adventure coach, you know, all things outdoors, really.
Yeah,
All
jumping off of cliffs, kayaking down raging rivers, especially with teenagers. So that's more amazing. So she is going to be talking about Innervision, not Innvervism, Innervision, and especially around how this translates into leadership, leading with authenticity and power. And so I'm excited to introduce Liz Swan. She'll be guiding us through this workshop for the next hour. And I do want to remind people that all of these workshops are being recorded. So if you don't want to go up on a website or YouTube or Facebook, please mute and turn off your video now. And so I will hand the reins over to our wonderful host for the next hour, and we'll get started.
Thank you so much, Shae. Amazing.
And I'm going to spotlight you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. Let me find the correct screen here to share it.
Hi, Elena.
And run it. Here we go. Okay, so it is Innervism. It's a bit of a tongue twister. It's a brand new word. You know, I didn't come up with this word. This is a term that's coined by Elizabeth Lesser, who is one of the co-founders of the Omega Institute, which I'm sure many people here are familiar with. So my presentation, this talk today, this session, however you want to phrase it, is really, I'm hoping to get your feedback. I want to hear what your thoughts are. This is really about Innervism, power, and leading with authenticity. And we're going to unpack all of those different things and how all of these play into this, you know, greater concept of being a good leader, leading with your authentic self, and why it's important to look within as a leader. And we're all leaders. I just want to say this first and foremost, we're all leaders in our own lives. So, you know, I've met a lot of people who don't consider themselves leaders yet, you know, whether they have, you know, not gotten to a certain level in business or however they define it. They feel like they aren't leaders, but we are all leaders in our own lives. So everybody can take something away from the work of leadership, right? Because we're all leading our own lives. So who am I? You know, here it is in a nutshell, folks. I'm a human being. I'm a leader. I'm a seeker of knowledge. I'm an educator. I'm a musician. I am one among many. I'm a high adventure instructor. I'm a coach. I'm a mentor. You know, I mean, I could check off all these boxes, but, you know, I didn't want to lead with my education or my degrees, because ultimately at the end of the day, I want you to just see me for who I am. And all of the ideas that I'm bringing to you today are not things that, you know, were just one day fell into my brain and I woke up with this amazing genius that I felt like I needed to share with the world. I do feel like I need to share a lot of these concepts and a lot of these wonderful topics with you, because I am inspired by them, and I know other people are inspired by them and the people who have written them. So I am really a culmination of what I have learned so far, and also an open book in that what do I really know? You know, so I really am just a combination of my experiences and the things that I've taken into my life. And all of that is constantly evolving, which I love about life. I love that about life. So I'm very grateful to be among such talented and wonderful, unique speakers who are doing the work of amazing human beings and light workers and sharing phenomenal gifts with all of us today. So very, very grateful to be here. Thank you, Shae, for putting this together. Just a shout out to you. You're amazing. And all the hard work that you put into this. So let's start to talk about leadership a little bit, and then we'll kind of dive into these different things. And hopefully it will be in a way that you feel like you can bring it into you and really sit with it, right? So the work of the self in leadership is really, really important. Okay. This is a passion of mine. It's a passion of mine to help other people step into their power and their leadership. This doesn't mean I have all the answers or that I'm the expert, right? There's a lot of people in the world. I would even say most people probably know more than me. And in fact, the older I get, the less I know. I don't remember which great wise philosopher said that, but that's certainly how I feel very often. So to help others become is to become more of myself. And I really love this because when I embrace my own authentic leadership, I am able to learn in an unlimited way, by the people that I work with and around. I don't consider myself above anyone or below anyone. I consider us all to be human beings on this path of knowledge and growth. And, so I really try to stay open, and I love stepping into more of myself through other people. Other people are messengers to me. So looking within myself is imperative in order to grow. And I would venture to say that that's true for most people. I typically don't like to generalize, but that is such an important part of becoming a good leader, is looking what is within ourselves. And this is what Innervism is really going to help us kind of look at in a deeper way, on another level, like looking below the surface. Okay, so part of leadership is being strong. And the definition of strength isn't what I used to think when I was a little kid growing up. It's not, holding back the tears and, pretending that you don't have feelings. Being strong is being vulnerable and open-minded. And that creates opportunities. That's what create opportunities for us. And I love that about life, because we never stop growing if we hold on to that. The work that goes into being in a place of authentic leadership is a combination of practices, mindsets, and evolving beliefs. This is so important. I mean, what I thought last year was probably very different than what I think today. And what I think next year might be different also. It might be more. It might be a little bit different. I might have some different edges to go in at. So, we're constantly evolving. And that's a really beautiful thing. So I just want to ask you, if you would be so inclined, you can absolutely throw it out in the chat. You can unmute yourselves. When we think of power, what comes to mind?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, even though I know it is not true, is like dominating over somebody or something else.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I have a different perspective, Shae. I think of self-confidence and knowing. To me, it's a presence.
Self-confidence.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you know what? You ladies, both of you, you're not wrong. Because there are different conceptions of power. And I think it's really important to understand what kind of power we're working with, right? So let's talk about this for a minute, okay? So an old definition of power, or, the traditional, the Machiavelli, all of these, like the art of war, all these traditional concepts of power. It's about possession, it's about authority, influence over others. Really, the standard definition of power is actually the ability to affect change, is what I have heard it described as. But, if we look at the dictionary definition, this is what it is: the ability to act or produce an effect. It's in your power to change things, right? But the president's power. So we think of power as a relationship, and there are actually 3 different types of power. And so I think it's really important that we kind of look at what those are. But let's talk about why we're talking about power. Okay, understanding what form of power you are using in your life is essential to understanding whether you are leading with authenticity. And it shifts the way we see and do everything from running a business, from parenting, from being a public servant, just from being. And it shifts the way that we are activists too. Now, I consider myself an activist for many different reasons and in many different evolutions of my life. And the way that I think about power and the way that power is held or wielded, right? It's a different thing to say that someone is wielding power as opposed to somebody is working with power. Okay. So the different definitions or different ways to think about power is to think about it as power over when you're in that place. And we'll unpack what power over does. And when you're leading in a place of power over, what happens, you know? So there's power over, which is pretty much how it sounds, right? You have power over other people. You are the one controlling things. And I sometimes think of like, you know, this really stringent corporation that's like, and you will have your report this month, and you will get this, and you will not get that, and you have to do this, and all these things like commanding, right? Then there is power with and power to. And that shares power. That's how we share power with the people that we work with. And that kind of power is what empowers people to be their best, to rise up, to perform, to find their own vision and their own passion for what it is they're doing, and gives them the freedom to be who they are. Okay, so that's power with and power to. And then there's power within. And we can think about power within as in like our inner strength and what helps us to overcome really difficult things, right? Difficult conversations, hard seasons of our life, losing someone, losing something, losing a house, you know, like there are so many complex losses that we experience throughout our life. And so many different ways that we move through it as a result of what we've experienced. I heard one of the speakers today talk about failure and how failure is how we become, we learn. It's imperative, you know? And I think about failure in a little bit of a different way. I think about it as just sort of, we're learning to master life, right? We're learning a little bit more, and each thing that we go through that maybe doesn't work out the way that we want it to, right? Because we are not all in control of the outcomes. We can do the best we can in the day, but we're not all on the other end granting our own wishes. So our power within really helps us to rise, to overcome, to learn, to see what the lesson in these difficult things are, but only if we are aware of it, right? So these concepts of power, these ways to think about power, work when you are aware of what you're working with. And our default mode is really power over. That's how most of us grow up, learning. We learn about power, and that's what we assume as children, right? Power over, because think about how children were raised, or at least back in the 70s and 80s, back when I was a kid, you know, power over for sure, fear. So power over instills fear, and fear becomes the motivator. And when fear is the motivator, it's not from a place of true productivity or a place of genuine creativity, right? So power over is not the place we want to be working in. We don't want to be working in power over, especially if we work with other people and we are part of a team and we have businesses that require the creative geniuses of other people to collaborate, which is how I love to work. I love to work in inspired environments. And I glean so much from what other people bring to the table. So I absolutely appreciate that creative vision. So when we use power over, we can't empower others. It halts the conversation. Power over comes from those traditional concepts, right? And these conceptions are masculine in energy too. And I think that that's really important. It's interesting to think about, you know, because really a lot of the stories that we have been told throughout history from hundreds of years ago, even 1,000 years ago, are very male in their conception, right? So these are very masculine energies, okay? And this power concept is based in ego, right? It's finite. this is like power is running out, like I have to take all the power. I have to have it.
I don't
Go
want
ahead, Shae. You want?
no, I don't want to stop you, but I just want to mention something because it came up in a conversation recently as we talk about like masculine and feminine, but that doesn't mean man and woman. Like women can have masculine qualities, men can.
Yes.
So I like to just mention that because sometimes, and you might have, we're going to say this, but sometimes when people hear masculine or patriarchy, they think men, but it's not really like men or women. It's more an energy.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. This is not about gender or gender identity. This is just about the energy of, what we're talking about. Okay. And so but this is our default mode, even if you look at feminism, the feminism that was born in the civil rights era, this was the form of power. This was the form of power embraced and used and mobilized, right? Because this was the understanding of power. And how do you respond to sort of oppression? You respond to it sort of in a similar way to being oppressed. So, the radical feminist movement in some ways used this power over model, right? So it's interesting to see how that works. So when we use power with, we are empowering people, right? We are working with people. We're helping them to inspire and to inspire them. They inspire us, we inspire them. It's the relationship that is the inspiration. It's what helps us to feel heard. It is so important to feel heard. I just can't stress it enough. And probably from my own experience, back in the old days of being in corporate America, corporate marketing, not feeling heard, not having a voice makes people feel very small. And so when people feel heard, when they feel valued, and when they have a voice, and when they're not afraid to share it, so many magical things can come from that. So power with is actually fluid. This is infinite, because power with relies on the idea that there is an infinite amount of power, that everybody, that it is a creative power, that it is joint. And when I talk about infinite mindset as opposed to finite ones, you can think of it sort of like playing a game. And Simon Sinek actually has written a really amazing book called The Infinite Game. I highly recommend it.
I just finished
Have you read it?
Yes.
It's so good.
Amazing.
It's
right?
so good. I love it. And you can actually catch some really amazing podcasts from Simon Sinek as well. Amazing, amazing man. I've read all of his books as well. I'm a little bit of a personal development Simon Sinek junkie. So when I'm talking about these finite and infinite mindsets, it's really having to do with how we hold something, how we look at something. Remember that our perspective, our perception shapes our reality. So if we are constantly in a lack mindset, if we're constantly worrying about what we're going to lose or not having enough, we're never going to have enough. We're always going to be in that place of lack. And there's no winners, right? Simon Sinek says there's no winners in business. Everybody has opportunities, and it's about the opportunities. And I'm just giving you the one sentence Cliff's notes on this book, because there's a lot there.
It's a big book.
It's a big book. It's a big book. And somebody could do a whole presentation just on his book. So as is true of many of the other reads that I'm going to mention tonight. So this form of power is unlimited, and it is not an accumulation. Okay. Power within helps us to rise, helps us overcome difficult trials in life and business, helps us to have compassion and empathy for others. It fuels our strength and imagination by reminding us of our why. See, another Simon Sinek book, Start With Why. I'll just cite myself throughout this presentation, like I'm writing a paper, but I'm reading it. But it helps us to seek courage, right? And it's really important to have a why, and a why is different than your vision. Why is what is going to carry you through your life. It's what legacy you want to leave on the world. it is something that there's a lot of really great exercises that can help you find your why. And if you haven't done them, I highly recommend them. I think they're so central to us understanding what our passions are, what we want to be in the world, who we want to be. I think it fits right in with the, reaching your dreams and just everything Sue Ellen was talking about as well, so really finding your why, very important.
I just want to pause you there for a minute, because that also came up on day one. We were even talking about our core values. So we have the bigger why, like our purpose, but even just our core values and how those are so important for communication, interpersonal relationship. Just so the why has lots of different layers.
It sure does. And then you have your vision, right? You have your core values. I like to think of it as there's like a little chart with your why in the middle, and then you have like all these like little bubbles. Remember when the teachers would ask you to do your diagrams and stuff, and you'd write in the bubbles all these different things? That's kind of how I do my why exercise. But your vision comes from your why. So your vision's going to help you drive forward, sort of like your mission statement of life, right? Is your vision.
I was just going to say, I developed, because of Simon Sinek, a personal mission statement, and it drives me every morning. It's beautiful.
It really is. It really is. If you're in a place right now in your life where you're looking for that little boost, and also I will say, doesn't resonate with everybody. Everybody's got to find the people that resonate with them, right? So if Simon Sinek isn't your thing, maybe Brene Brown is. Who knows? I mean, lots of great people out there. Listen to podcasts. Work on it. Just amazing stuff that can light you up. So power within, rise up. All right, now here we go. Innervism, what is it? So I have to tell you, I'm going to just be totally transparent with you. I'm like, what am I doing talking about Innervism? This lady just wrote this book like a few months ago, and I'm going to have the audacity to come here and do a presentation and talk to you guys about Innervism. And you know what? I was talking to a friend of mine, and thank goodness for Barbara, because she talked me off the ledge, Shae. She was like, no, you got to do it, Liz. You got to do it, because, people need, right? She's so great. She's so encouraging. She's like, you got to do it because people do need to hear about it. So I want to just say again, not an expert, just merely one of the messengers that is here for you this week in these amazing collections of people. Okay. So Innervism. This term was coined by Elizabeth Lesser. She is the founder of the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, or co-founder, really. So she uses the term Innervism to describe the absolute importance of looking at oneself, looking at how we connect with the world, looking at how we show up in our own lives, looking at our thought patterns, looking at that relationship with power, looking at where are we putting blame in different places instead of taking responsibility and accountability? How are we relating to the world? And I highly recommend her book, Cassandra Speaks, if this is like striking a chord with anyone. Innervism. She equates it very much with activism as well. They exist independently of each other, but they're imperative for each other as well. Because as we're doing the work of activism, we also have to be looking at what's going on within ourselves, right? And this is also relating back to that work of self and how important it is in being a good leader. And that's just being a good leader in your life. And you can apply that anywhere, okay? So she also describes it looking at our shadow self, to understand how to become more aware, how to dive into what's holding us back so we can move forward. This is imperative when it comes to activist work, right? If we feel moved to a cause, we must also be aware of dogma and linear thinking of our own. All right, so I don't know. Yeah, how many of you are familiar with shadow work? Right. Oh, you're on top of it. I'm telling you. So
I have a whole course that I do on shadow work, right? It's amazing.
That's awesome. And I love that there are people that are becoming more aware of that. My wife, Elena, who's going to be doing she's going to be doing a session tomorrow And I hope you guys tune in for that, because she's an amazing meditation teacher, spiritual teacher, and she's going to be talking about manifestations. But, you know, we really have been talking about shadow work, and she's been doing a lot of shadow work for the last year and a half. And at first I was like, shadow work, what are you doing this shadow work? Because I'm more, I would say I'm here on this planet grounded very firmly, rooted in reality most times. I mean, I would say maybe 80% of the time. And Elena's kind of the, you know, free floating, very spiritual, very like connected divinely, you know, always operating at this sort of higher level. And so we have this dynamic of, you know, bouncing back and forth. So she really pulls me into her world and I pull her back into mine. And it's amazing because, you know, those opposites do attract. So I hope you tune into her. But shadow work, that was the first time I ever heard of it. And that was like a year and a half ago. And after I read Elizabeth Lesser, I was like, this makes sense. This delivery of my understanding of shadow work from her makes sense. So I love all of the different works to look beneath the surface at what's going on within ourselves, to see where we might be falling short, which is sometimes a really hard thing to do. I don't know if any of you guys have ever done any of that digging. I mean, I'm sure you guys have. Yeah. It's hard, right? Do you ever feel stuck in it? Like weighed down? And
Well,
like,
but when you do the work, you lose like 30 pounds.
yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's the best diet ever.
I love that.
I completely agree.
Yeah, like the weight.
It's amazing to get rid of those nasty things inside of you.
Yeah, exactly. But once you
That's
can,
how I feel about it.
you're just lighter and yeah.
Yeah. So the work of doing
Totally.
that shadow work, engaging with those difficult parts of yourself, really pulling them out, helps us to just get unstuck too. If you're feeling stuck in your life, if you're feeling stuck in your business, look at what's going on. Now, don't be stuck in doing that all the time, right? We have to also live. We have to also function. We have to have joy. We have to find balance. It's really important. Like if I was working on my shadow self 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I don't know where I'd be. I wouldn't be here on this call right now. So, you know, there is a balance, but it does have to be done if we want to move forward. And here's the question. So what is it we're trying to do? What is it that we're trying to do? I love this quote by Nietzsche. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process, he does not become a monster. Now, this is important, and this is an important concept that goes along with Innervism and why we do this work of Innervism, right? Because when we engage with the world without being aware of how we're engaging, why we're engaging, and what our own hangups might be, we become exactly what we are fighting not to become, right? We are fighting what we become if we're not aware. So when we are creating meaningful change from within, there's different layers. There's so many different layers of affecting change. And just the two very basic are external and internal, but we have spiritual, we have metaphysical. I mean, there are just limitless possibilities of where we can affect change. These exist independently of one another, and yet they kind of rely on one another. The inside and the outside, they don't always match, and that's okay. And in my experience over time, sometimes I end up having to kind of act counterintuitively to how I feel, because I know that somewhere in my thinking, Liz doesn't have all the answers, that Liz is not always telling Liz the truth, because there are stories that we tell each other, ourselves and each other, because we end up, you know, making these things up in our mind, stories about ourselves, stories about our limitations, fear of failure, fear of success, all these things that we tell ourselves that we can't do, or we tell ourselves a situation through a perception that is not how other people intend for it to be perceived, and have miscommunications. So really having a level of clarity and looking at what it is really, you know, what is this really? I have asked myself that question probably, 2 times a day for the last 2.5 years, because that's my thinking. That's the nature of my thinking. It's not always a reflection of the truth. And I like to say this too, feelings are always valid, and they're not always a reflection of what is true in the world. They are valid, and sometimes they're not always true of what is happening in the world, right? Because I think for the most part, people don't walk around intentionally hurting each other and doing things to make other people upset. I think for the most part. There's exceptions, obviously. I'm not generalizing.
It is a good point, though, because yesterday Dr. Armesto was talking about compassion, and I think that people are going to wrong you, but if you can have compassion that, oh, maybe this happened to that person and that's why they're acting that way, versus, like you were just saying, creating these stories in your head, it shifts the human experience so much.
Yeah, yeah. And I think also that when we live in our own heads, which I am an expert at, just to let you know, that's one thing I will claim a PhD in living in my own head. Granted to me by myself. But when I get into that place of overthinking, I have to step back. And that's when I ask myself that question of, what is this really? What is this really? What is really the intention? Is this person doing this action? And then am I defaulting to one of those old models of power, or I'm defaulting to a lack mindset where I'm then getting all scrappy and starting to think things in my head that just aren't true? So really dealing with distorted thinking, this is really helpful for that. Okay. But we don't want to dwell. We're going to acknowledge and let it go. And we can't beat ourselves up for these things either. I can't beat myself up for what I did a year ago that might not have been a stellar decision. We're human beings. We all make mistakes. Part of being an authentic leader, a good leader, is to acknowledge that we aren't perfect, and to acknowledge, like, hey, I wasn't right about that. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I didn't hear you. And that's something that I work on all the time. I have to have difficult conversations in my business sometimes. And, it's kind of scary and overwhelming still. You'd think that at certain points that it might be easy, but it really never is, because taking responsibility and holding yourself accountable, it always is like, oh man, I did that, didn't I? That came out of my mouth, didn't I? I said that. Oh, gee whiz, I'm going to do better. I'm going to take that and I'm going to do better next time. So I let it go and I move on. But acknowledging it helps everybody, right? It's part of our authentic connection with other people and having these relationships.
I think it speaks to vulnerability too, which I think has been a hot topic with like people like Brene Brown, which you mentioned, that courage to be vulnerable and say, I made a mistake, and the self-work that's required to be able to do that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and she's amazing, right? Like, she's sort of the vulnerability head grand high master. I'm like, yes, Brene Brown, if you're talking about vulnerability, I will listen.
I love her podcast.
Yes, she's amazing. She's got the Dare to Lead, and what's that other one?
Call to Courage. Was it Call to Courage, or was that the Netflix?
That's the Netflix. There's one on Spotify, and then there's one on the Apple podcasts, and some of them overlap, but she's great. She always has great guest speakers and interviews, and she does a lot of work with authenticity and vulnerability. And so she has a lot of amazing things to share. Brene Brown is like a fixer. She's like the master social worker of the world right now, I think. She's trying to heal the earth. So when we're leading with authenticity, it's really a matter of understanding who we are. And you can hopefully see how Innervism is a concept and a practice that can help us do that on a deeper level. So understanding who we are isn't just understanding what we've done and what we love to do and knowing where we want to go, but knowing how we connect with other people and things in the world in order to move us forward in a way that feels good, not only to us, but to the people that we are connected with. I know for me that my work in leadership and mentoring other people has made me a better parent. I know that, by listening to the people that I work with, I have more patience even for my own BS. And in fact, that's kind of what Elizabeth Lesser describes Innervism as, is looking at your own BS. That's what she says. She said, really, it's the process of looking at your own BS. I'm keeping it clean.
I was having in one of the sessions yesterday, and forgive me, anybody who's already heard this story, but I started this new habit where if a negative thought's going through my mind or something, I'm like, Shae, why do you think that? Or I'll say it out loud, because I'm starting to realize like, that's so silly. And so the Shae kind of like activates my inner child. Like, Shae, why are you thinking that? Stop thinking that. And that's been such a silly but effective tool to like stop that train.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great tip, Shae, because that's kind of like what I do. I like shake myself, I'm like, Liz, get off the thought train.
Yeah, it's that resourcing a little bit, like Sharon even talked to. What's that resource that you can anchor to come back to the present moment?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's important for us all to find that piece, because something has to be the reset button. So I often refer to myself as an Etch-a-Sketch. I just need to sometimes shake myself upside down and erase what's there and start over. And sometimes that's disappointing. And we think about that, and that's true. It can be we have disappointments that are very physical in nature, a project that doesn't go the way we want, and we end up scrapping it and having to start all over, and we've invested all this time. And I'm sure all of you know what I'm talking about. And we have that inner work too, like I've done that inner work and been like, oh, this was totally wrong. This was like the most blinded period of my life. I was in such a dogmatic phase in my 20s. It was unbelievable. I'm so glad you guys didn't know me as a 20-year-old. You guys would have been like, whoa, hot mess. Hot mess.
I'm glad no one knows me from then either. So
we can blame it on the planets, though. If you were in Carol's presentation yesterday.
I'm going to do that now. I'm going to blame it on the planets. But you know what I realized also, and so many people, so many amazing people, and, just share the same sentiment as well. I needed to be there. Oh, God, I needed to do those stupid things, make bad decisions, have this linear thinking. I needed to do all those things. I wouldn't be who I am today unless I've done those things. I wouldn't have survived the things that I have, because I needed to be very grit. I needed to be very stubborn and strong to get through really difficult things, and strong in like the non-Brene Brown way, right? Like I'm not going to have my feelings, but I had to get here somehow. I wouldn't have gotten there. So I have to honor my past as well, but really glad I'm not 20 anymore.
I'm
Anyways.
so glad you said that though, Liz, because it's so easy to get caught up in like the regrets and the shame, and regret, I think, is one of the least useful emotions, but it is so present and prevalent. But if all of those things didn't happen in your life, you wouldn't be where you are in this moment. So I think that's such a great reminder.
It's so true. And, I really do believe in divine purpose, that we are all where we are supposed to be, even if that's frustrating as heck, that we are all where we are supposed to be at this current time. Oh, and it's frustrating. Believe me, there are days that I'm like, no, I should be. And then I cross out that word should, right? Because that's when I get into trouble with all the shoulds. Get rid of that word, guys. Get rid of it. Get rid of the word should. I could, unless you're like talking about doing the laundry and you haven't done it for like 2 weeks and you're like, I should do the laundry, then do the laundry, for goodness sakes. Luckily, I have an Elena. She does the laundry, I cook the dinner. You guys know way too much about our personal lives. Anyways, so going back to leading with authenticity, which is really what this is all about, helping us to lean into our more authentic selves, our deeper human purposes as well. You know, what are we going for? I'm going for a level of humanism right now. Humanity, right? Humanism, understanding who we are, having a solid foundation of why to drive us, a vision that goes with that to drive us forward, showing up for others. You know, part of leading with authenticity is showing up, is doing what you say, being that person, apologizing when it all goes out the window, because sometimes it does. As you try, we are still human and it is bound to happen. But showing up and saying, hey, I'm sorry I missed that. That was, you know, my bad. How can we make this better? And learning from it and redirecting, right? Allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and being honest with other people, but being honest with ourselves. Oh man, it's like, you know, I take a magnifying glass to my soul a lot. And I really do a deep look at, you know, what am I doing here? How am I doing? You know, how did I do with this situation? Now, I'm not under the microscope 24 hours a day, like I said, because that would be like torture. So we have to have that space. We have to allow ourselves to look and reflect and say, yeah, that was great. I feel really confident about that, or I need to let that go and I need to move forward. And I don't like the way I handled that situation, or I don't like the way that makes me feel. And if you don't like the way something makes you feel, that's when you take a look at it. You're like, well, let me unpack that. Why don't I feel good about that? Because we all have it. We all have intuition. Raise your hand if you have intuition. Yep. We all feel it. We all feel it in different places too, right? We feel it in our heart, feel it in our stomach. Some people feel it in their shoulders, their head, you know, your physical body and your emotional body. It's all connected. All connected. And there's a really good book on that I read recently as well, called Burnout. Really, really good. Highly recommend. But that's another story for another day. All right. So what are the gifts of leading with authenticity? What do we get for it? What are we doing all this work for? What are we doing this for, Liz? Why are we working so hard at you know, picking ourselves apart? We get to set healthy boundaries. We form relationships that are built on trust. We are able to listen to people and really listen and really hear them. I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking today. This is not what I usually do. Most of my job is listening to other people, especially when I work with teenagers. I work with kids ages 13 to 17. It's sort of my wheelhouse. It's a passion of mine. I love to help kids really find their feet, find their confidence, help them to understand communication through outdoor education, high adventure, like mountain climbing, high ropes courses, low ropes courses, team building challenge course, and to watch them work together and to like listen to what's going on is pretty amazing, because you can see their personalities really coming out and you can see their mind like, oh my gosh, I just learned something for the first time about communication, or I just overcame a humongous obstacle. Not saying that I don't have that same experience with adults, but I feel like that age is such a pivotal time, you know. It's really, it's tough for kids. You know, a lot of kids have pent up things. Kids have a hard time communicating, but you put them in an outdoor education, high adventure situation, they fly. I'm telling you, they do. But it's amazing because they have to listen to each other and I have to listen to them. And so when we're able to listen, we can help redirect and mirror back what they're saying and help them to understand what they're learning too. And that goes for every person. So we can form these amazing dynamic partnerships when we're an authentic leader. We can have that infinite mindset. We can recognize others without being in a fear of lack. You know, sometimes that's the most important thing that drives people forward. That's the inspiring thing. That's what inspires people. You know, everybody has a different love language, right? So, you know, a lot of the time recognition really helps a lot of the people that I work with, not just kids, but, you know, my business partners as well. So it helps to lift other people up. We can lift other people up through this work of authenticity, and we can let them shine, which is an amazing gift to be able to. It's not for me. But it's a beautiful thing. And I feel like everybody wins. Like
And
everybody wins.
And I think recognition is also an example of the law of abundance and the law of attraction. If you give,
Uh-oh.
oh, am I
Shae,
frozen? Am I frozen?
You were, but it just
Oh,
speed.
okay. I thought it was me. I'm like, oh no, because
No, I was just saying that the recognition of others, lifting other people up, letting other people shine, it's like so in line with the law of attraction and the law of abundance. It's being in that abundant mindset. Like, just because I give you recognition doesn't take it away from me. Like, there's enough, and yeah, puts you in that flow and that alignment. I love that.
Yeah.
So,
I love it. I love it too. If I see one of the people that I work with on a stage, one of the people that I mentor, yeah, and they're walking across the stage, pre-pandemic, of course, and they're walking across this stage and they're, you know, in front of thousands of people and they're getting like, yeah, you know, people are celebrating them. I'm just like, that is amazing. I'm like, you go get it, girl. Bravo, you do you, you know, like amazing for them to feel that. And I can feel that joy for them and with them. All right, so I have some recommended works, okay, because I've talked your faces off, and then we'll open it up for any discussion, any more comments. So these are just a few of the works that I have referenced in this talk for you. Okay, Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, although she has lots of brilliant books. Cassandra Speaks, 100%. If you like this idea of Innervism and you want to really unpack that from the person who, right from the horse's mouth, go to Elizabeth Lesser and get Cassandra Speaks. It's available on Amazon. You can also buy it on Omega, I believe. But really, really amazing. And it's really about how when women tell the stories of history, history changes. So it really is about the feminine experience and how things are sort of shifting from this masculine energy to more of a balance now, and being able to share both energies. Okay, again, you know, I'll reiterate what Shae said. It's not about gender identity or, you know, blame on any, you know, like men or women did this, men did that. It's not about that. But highly recommended if you want to unpack that idea of Innervism more deeply. And The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, and Beyond Good and Evil by Nietzsche, if you really want to just go into a dark hole for about a month and not talk to anybody. But that's from my philosophy days. So anyways, Nietzsche is always very interesting, but be ready. Let's see what else. Oh, and here's my contact information. Friends welcome, questions welcome. You can Facebook friend me. You can add me on LinkedIn. You can email me. You could even call me and be like, hey, Liz, what's up? You know, and I'll be like, hey, what's going on? You could call me and talk about Innervism and be like, hey, I read the book Cassandra Speaks. Let's have a conversation. I also have a leadership series that I'm starting in February. This is going to happen every week. It's going to be a collective. It is just going to be an amazing, amazing group of people. It's people from all different walks of life, all different business backgrounds, and it's everybody coming together, giving their suggestions for podcasts, movies, documentaries, books, and we're going to have these amazing talks every week. So definitely connect with me if you're interested in that, and I will shoot you some more information. I haven't picked a start date, but February, sometime in February, toward the end.
Liz, just so you know, I have been putting links in our Facebook group with your website, all the books that you're recommending. So I've been trying to keep track of all that for you so people have those resources.
You are amazing, Shae. I just want to just give you a virtual hug right now. I want to give everybody a virtual hug.
Yes, let's do that.
But amazing, and I'm so grateful again that I could be here and share some of this with you. So does anybody have any questions first? We'll go. comments?
Well, again, I'm just going to comment on the synchronicity of everything, that's happened over the last couple of days, and all of these topics, having your core values, working on yourself, being vulnerable, having compassion, just like all these threads and themes that I think are going to so inform how we head into this year of 2021 and these
Yeah.
new rules that we can start to live by. It's really just so pivotal, I think.
I
Yeah.
just wanted to say, so when I was a philosophy major, Nietzsche was my focus, and it's so interesting to me because that's my 20s. I left that, I went into business, I do all this other stuff, and it's so cool that I'm coming back, and I love that synchronicity that you brought up, Nietzsche. Very, very cool. This has been awesome. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I was a philosophy major as well, so we probably have a lot to talk about. We don't want to go to the dark and twisty, though.
Oh, yes, we do.
We can get dark and twisty, but that's for another day. All right. Well, if anybody has anything else, now is the time.